We were told this movie was over. Inflation peaked in 2022, cooled for 3 years, and the credits were rolling. Then came the May report. Prices up 4.2% in a year. The hottest reading in 3 years. The sequel nobody ordered is in theaters. But here's what matters. This is not the same inflation as last time. Different cause, different cure, different villain. Treating it like a rerun is exactly how policymakers and your wallet get hurt. 10 minutes. What actually reignited it, how one closed strait ends up in your bread, and why the world's central banks are stuck in a trap with no good lever. First, the numbers without the panic. Prices rose 0.5% in May alone, after 0.6 in April. Year over year, 4.2. The Fed's comfort zone is 2. We're at more than double. And the report names its suspect in the first paragraph, energy, responsible for over 60% of May's entire increase. Energy prices jumped almost 11% in March alone, then kept climbing 4% a month, every month since. One category, most of the fire, which is your first clue this isn't 2021 again. The cause has a street address, the Strait of Hormuz. 1/5 of the world's oil flows through it, and since March, war has strangled that flow, in the largest oil disruption ever recorded. Crude jumped past $100. Gasoline followed within days. And economies started wobbling. Britain's actually shrank in April as energy costs bit. Europe's central bank was rattled enough to hike rates for the first time since 2023. One waterway, 21 miles wide, reignited inflation on 3 continents. Globalization's fine print. Everyone shares the supply shocks. And the pain is not evenly shared. This is the unfair kind of inflation. It taxes countries by geography. Japan and most of Europe import nearly all their oil. Every pricier barrel is income leaving the country. Britain's economy already shrank in April. Exporters live in the mirror image. Gulf states and Norway are collecting windfalls, and America, now the top producer, is partly hedged against its own pain at the pump. Same barrel, same price, opposite fortunes. Geography is doing the taxing. Now, the idea this whole video turns on, inflation comes in 2 species, and they only look alike. Species 1, demand pull. Too much money chasing goods, the 2021 variety. Stimulus checks, savings floods, everyone buying at once. Demand outran supply. Species 2, cost push. The money didn't grow, the stuff shrank. A war, a drought, a blocked strait removes supply, and every remaining unit costs more. Today is species 2. Nobody got a stimulus check in March. An oil tap got turned off. Same fever, different infection. And as any doctor will tell you, treating the wrong infection has side effects. But wait, why does oil raise the price of everything else? Because energy isn't a product. It's an ingredient in all of them. The diesel in the tractor, the freighter, and the delivery truck is in your bread's price 3 separate times before it's in your toaster. Plastics, fertilizer, asphalt, petroleum by other names. Airfares track jet fuel. Electricity bills track gas turbines. Economists call these second-round effects. The shock enters as fuel, then echoes as groceries, shipping fees, and temporary surcharges that somehow survive the emergency. That's why an energy spike never stays in the energy aisle. It leaks, slowly, into everything. Now put yourself in the central banker's chair. Your only real tool. Interest rates. Rates work by cooling demand, pricier loans, fewer purchases. But this inflation isn't excess demand. It's missing supply. No interest rate on earth reopens a strait. Hiking just makes a supply shock, also a recession. Do nothing, though, and you risk something worse. People concluding inflation is back for good and acting like it. That's why the ECB hiked anyway, not to fix oil, but to defend its credibility. The hike is a message, not a wrench. We will not let this settle in. Damned if you hike, damned if you don't. Supply shocks turn central banking from engineering into theater. Because here's the deepest mechanic. Inflation runs on expectations. It persists when people expect it to persist. If workers expect 5% inflation, they demand 5% raises. Firms expecting higher costs raise prices preemptively. The expectation manufactures the reality, the wage price spiral. So watch the survey data like the bankers do. Households currently expect about 4.6% inflation next year, down a tick from last month. Anchored but straining. And the mood matters too. Consumer sentiment hit its lowest level ever recorded in May, before bouncing slightly as gas eased. The war for prices is fought in the oil market. The war for inflation is fought inside everyone's head. If you want to know why central bankers lose sleep over expectations, the 1970s left them a scar. After the '73 embargo, inflation got into people's heads. Workers demanded raises, firms raised prices, and the spiral spun for a decade. Washington's first weapon was buttons. President Ford handed out pins reading "Whip inflation now." Inflation declined the invitation. By 1980, U.S. inflation hit nearly 15%. Breaking it took Paul Volcker raising rates toward 20% and 2 brutal recessions. Britain had it even worse. Inflation peaked near 27% in 1975, and within a year the UK needed an IMF rescue, a G7 economy, bailed out like an emerging market. That's the bill when the anchor snaps. Not one bad year, a decade, plus the surgery to end it. It's why today's bankers hike at the first whiff of smoke. They're not fighting this year's oil. They're fighting 1979's ghost. So, how does the sequel end? Watch 3 things. 1. The Strait. Shipping is expected to resume later this year, and energy-driven inflation tends to unwind almost as fast as it arrived. The Dallas Fed expects exactly that fade. 2. The math itself helps. Once this spring spike is a year old, it drops out of the yearly comparison. Economists call it base effects. The number can fall while prices merely stop rising. 3. Expectations holding anchor. If wage demands stay calm, this stays a spike, not a spiral. Goldman still pencils inflation near 2% in 2027, barring new shocks. The honest summary: painful, mostly imported, probably temporary, probably doing some heavy lifting. So inflation came back, but as the other species, not too much money, too little oil, leaking from one strait into every price you pay. The cure isn't rate hikes, it's supply returning, plus central banks performing confidence loudly enough that nobody starts the spiral. Until then, you now read the report better than the headlines do. Check what's driving it before deciding what it means. 60% of this fever is one ingredient. Watch the strait, not the thermometer.